Okay, I'm back with chapter 10 of the Gospel of John. I'm not going to have you write a sermon outline for chapters 9 and 10 the way I've done in the past. But what I am going to do is, like you did yesterday, I want you to respond to these videos that I'm going to put up today with a sermon topic or a preaching point and 2 or 3 sentences telling me about that preaching point. So we're in chapter 10 of the Gospel of John, and Jesus is still in Jerusalem, and it's still in October. It's the fall of the year, the autumn of the year there in Jerusalem in the northern hemisphere. And it's at the time just following the Feast of Tabernacles. And at least that's the setting for the first 21 verses in John chapter 10. Jesus has just healed the man who had been born blind. He had had these discussions with the religious leaders who were upset about it, and especially him doing it on the Sabbath. And so this argument arose, is he from God? Is he not from God? And Jesus ultimately said, well, you are responsible for your sins because you claim to have spiritual insight. You say that you're not ignorant of things. And therefore there's no reason for you not to believe in the Son of Man. As a matter of fact, the last verse of John chapter 9, let me fix this video here. I'll get it. The last verse of John chapter 9, the last 2 verses, John 40 says, some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what, are we blind too? Or are you saying that we're blind? And Jesus said, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. In other words, you claim that you know what you're talking about. You claim that you're not ignorant. And so your guilt remains. You should be a follower of the Son of Man. Since you claim you can see, since you claim you're not ignorant, then you're guilty if you don't follow the Son of Man. Chapter 10 picks right up where chapter 9 leaves off because, John didn't make chapter headings. That was added later. And so this is part of the same scene, but Jesus will go on here to talk about 2 other I am statements. He will say that I am the gate and I am the good shepherd. We've already seen where Jesus said, I am the bread of light and I am life and I am the light of the world. Now Jesus will say, I am the gate and I am the good shepherd. And he uses these illustrations, these figures of speech. They're not really considered parables, but they are similar to parables in a way. And so we'll start with chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus said, I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but he didn't understand what he was telling them. So Jesus doesn't come right out and make his point. This is very parable-like when he says of sheep that they follow their shepherd and they recognize their shepherd's voice. My dog is that way. We have a dog over here in the United States. Actually, we have two. But one dog in particular, Copper, he's the oldest. He's about 11 years old. And if he's out somewhere and I don't know where he is, all I have to do is whistle. Or and he'll come running. He knows my whistle. He knows my voice. And he knows that he wants me to come. He wants that I want him to come and follow me. And Jesus says this about sheep, that if you go to the sheep pen, and what I understand is that the shepherds, they would watch their sheep during the day, but at night they would all put them together in a sheep pen. All the different shepherds would put their sheep together in one sheep pen, and then they would pay someone to watch the sheep at night while they were in the pen. Or maybe they would take turns watching all the sheep while they're in the sheep pen at night, and people could get a night's rest and maybe go home. Well, Jesus said that the robbers, when they come to rob the sheep, they don't enter in by the gate. No, he'll come over the fence or he'll slip under the fence. But for the man who is the owner of the sheep, the watchman opens the gate, lets them in. He calls his sheep by name. And his sheep, the sheep of his flock, will come out and follow him because they know his voice. And the sheep that don't belong to this particular shepherd will stay in the pen and wait for their owner to come and get them. And so they know who their shepherd is, and their shepherd knows them. And he goes on ahead of them and they follow him. That's the thing about sheep. Sheep aren't herd animals, they are flock animals. A cow or a goat, you have to drive them because they're herd animals. You have to get behind them and drive them. But a sheep will follow. And Jesus says that the owner of the sheep can call his sheep and they will follow him because they know his voice. But they won't ever follow a stranger because the stranger is not the one they're used to. They don't recognize the stranger's voice. Now, Jesus was making a comparison to those religious leaders, or he was pointing out the problem that they had, and the problem they had was spiritual blindness. Before, he had talked about how that they were sons of their father, the devil. And Jesus is there calling, and none of them are following. And so by implication, Jesus is saying, you're not my sheep. You're not following me. My sheep do know me, and my sheep follow me, and I have followers. But they didn't understand. And Jesus says in verse 7, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And so the first thing Jesus tells them is, I am the gate to the sheep pen. Again, he's speaking physically, but he has a spiritual meaning in mind. I am the gate. And if you enter into the sheep pen through me, you will be saved. As a matter of fact, he says that everyone who came before me, They're just robbers. They're just trying to get what they could out of it. But if you come to me, and if you come into the kingdom through me, then you will come in and go out and find pasture. But don't follow anyone else, because they're thieves. And then in verse 11, he says, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. And so Jesus introduces himself as the good shepherd. And he says, a good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And he said, it's not that way with other people. They won't lay their life down for you. They won't lay their life down for the sheep. A hired man, for instance, won't do that. But Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. Verse 14, he repeats it. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And this is what we were talking about before. His sheep know him. They hear his voice, and they follow. Jesus knows his sheep, his people. And he knows who he's leading. And so, verse 14, I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I know my sheep, and I lay down my life for my sheep. Jesus keeps hinting here at a shepherd giving his life for the sheep. And ultimately, we're going to know what that's all about. In verse 16, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them in also. They, too, will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This command I received from the Father. Okay, this little section here has a couple of very important points in it. The first thing Jesus says is that I have other sheep. Now, what he's referring to are Gentiles. That there are Gentiles that need to come in and be a part of this flock, the saved, the kingdom of God. Right now, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. He's been sent to the lost people of Israel. And ultimately, he says, I have other sheep that aren't a part of this sheep pen. They aren't Jewish, but they must be brought in to the sheep pen as well. And the second thing is where Jesus says, the reason my Father loves me is that I laid down my life only to take it up again. And he's saying, no one is doing this. I'm doing it of my own accord, because that's what the Father expects of me. It isn't some accident that Jesus would die on the cross. It isn't a case of evil triumphing over Jesus. He says he lays down his life only to take it up again, and no one takes it from him. He lays it down of his own accord. And he says, I have the authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it back up. In essence, he's saying, I'm God, and I have authority to do these things. Verse 19. At these words, the Jews were divided. Many of them said, he's demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? And we've already seen some of them that are like that. But the others said, these are not sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? And so we're back to what we saw back in chapter 9, where some of them said that this man's not from God, he's not keeping the Sabbath. And others said, well, he has to be from God because we know that God doesn't listen to a sinner, and he opened a man's blind eyes. And they're still divided, even after all the things that Jesus said about them being blind, spiritually blind, about him being the door to the sheep gate, about him being the good shepherd. They were still divided. Some of them said he's demon possessed and he's crazy, so there ain't no use to listen to him. But others said, you know, these aren't the sayings of a madman that we're listening to. And besides, how can a demon-possessed man open the eyes of the blind? Okay. Write me up a little statement here, a preaching point. Give me 2 or 3 sentences to tell about that preaching point, and send it to my inbox on WhatsApp. Okay? And I'll get you another video up for the rest of John chapter 10. God bless everybody.